This is episode 30. Wow, 30 episodes in already of the debrief. I'm Tyler Burns. My co host, Cody Randall, is a slacker today. He had to do some interviews for work. So, for whatever reason, work takes precedence over doing interviews. But that's all right. We'll let it slide this time. So, before I bring in our guest, I'm kind of testing something out new here a little bit. But before I bring in our guest, want to put out a few reminders to everybody that checks out the show. First of all, thank you to, I haven't even looked at our analytics, but last I knew we had close to a couple hundred followers between Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. So appreciate every single one of you. Reminders, check out the website, debriefwithtyler.com. If you primarily listen on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, check out the YouTube page. We're trying to get that growing a little bit more. It makes it a little bit more personal. And I like to throw in clips. So if you listen to last week's episode where I interviewed Jason White, at the beginning I have a clip in there from when he was on the first 48, one of the episodes from there. So check that out if you're just listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Probably sounds kind of weird because you just hear the music and then you hear him talk. With that, I'm going to go ahead and bring in Brandon. So Brandon is a corporal with Jasper County Sheriff's Department. He's also a volunteer firefighter with Rensselaer Fire Department. You may recognize his last name. I interviewed his mom. It was one of the first few episodes that I did. And so I'm pretty excited about this episode. We'll go ahead and bring Brandon in here. Welcome, Brandon.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I say us as if like my co-host is still here. I've been so
There's
used
more
to
of
having
us.
him on the show. What's that?
Like there's more of us.
Right. I'm used to having him on the show all the time, and the one time he's not able to make it, he's kind of kicking himself though because he doesn't like to miss interviews. So, but he had to interview some people today. So, Brandon, let's start off with tell me a little bit about life growing up. Where'd you grow up at? Siblings? We'll start there. Work our way up.
So I was born in Lafayette. Grew up in Rensselaer my whole entire life. One older sister. She's about 4 years older than me. Growing up, both mom and dad in the house. Good parenting system. They were very eager to watch both of us succeed and push us to succeed. Going through school, there was quite a bit of hiccups. Mom and I, dad and I would always butt heads because we're all stubborn, as most kids think they are. But good parenthood. Definitely wanted us to succeed and try to better ourselves even when we thought we were already better.
So I know I interviewed your mom, and run ideas past her all the time, and she gives me some ideas of people to talk to and topics to talk about. But kind of talk a little bit about what does your mom do? What does your dad do?
So mom's a mental health therapist through Valley Oaks. She made it her mission to actually help out first responders and kind of help understand them a little bit better, which is amazing. She's had a few hiccups here and there, but that's expected. Dad, he owns a construction business with my grandfather. I mean, as we know, construction business is a little tough right now, but they're making do. He's been on the fire department for as long as I can remember.
What specifically in construction does he do?
Mostly like pole barn garages. He'll do like small projects like roofs, sheds, siding, windows.
Yes.
He he can do a lot of or all of it really, but a lot of it's by choice. Just because he doesn't like to get into the houses because it's only him and one other person. So that's a pretty big job for just him and one other person to do. And then again, you got all the codes and everything like that, which are good to be there, but it's a lot of work for just two people.
My wife and I built our current home. We moved in here about a year ago, and man, I can't imagine how big of a pain it is for the builders, especially dealing with me and my wife. But it was a huge pain for us, and yeah, so many. I mean, the codes seem to change so frequently, and like right now, there's this one code that drives me absolutely nuts. So I know you're a firefighter. I'm a former firefighter. somebody's going to give me crap for saying that because there's no such thing as a former. But there's this new code in Indiana, and as far as I know, I don't know if any other states do this, but there's this new code that because these houses are sealed up so tight, there has to be an exhaust fan in some room that's constantly running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And that's to circulate the air, in and out of the house, whatever. Makes sense. However, what doesn't make sense is from a firefighting standpoint, what is probably, I don't even want to give a percentage, but a good portion of our structure fires are started by exhaust fans, electrical issues up in the attic, and then it goes unnoticed until your whole house is on fire. So I never quite understood why they made that a building code, but whatever. I'm not a
Yeah,
I'm not a
I mean
whatever they call.
that's definitely new to me. I mean, I've been out of the construction field for a while. My junior and senior year of high school, Rensselaer Central has a program to where, the students in the class were able to build houses. So I did that my junior and senior year. We didn't my junior year we built the house about 80, 90%. Just a few things left for the following year or over the summer to do, which they pretty much hired out to do that. But my senior year, we got about halfway through, which is a shame, but it is what it is. So I mean, I've been out of the construction field for quite a while, so the codes and stuff like that, I don't even try to keep up with.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I have no reason to keep up with it anymore. So had a pretty decent relationship with your parents, and you mentioned you guys butted heads, which I don't know any high school aged kid, any teenager that didn't butt heads with their parents. My mom frequently listens to my shows, so she'll agree with me that we had our moments too, but
I'm sure my mom's
pretty
doing the same
common.
exact thing.
Do you get along with your sister?
Absolutely. Yeah. We pretty close. It's actually kind of cool right now. She is a dispatcher for the sheriff's office that I work for. She's a nighttime dispatcher. So
So
that's
just
kind of
about
cool.
everybody in the family does some form of public safety then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because technically, even your mom does. Because I mean, she has to be there to help us through our messed up mindsets.
Well, it's funny you say that because mom doesn't just only deal with first responders, but she also deals with the average Joe just walking down the street. So there's actually a running joke around it of like Aaron will dispatch somebody and then they'll come to jail and then they'll get out and they'll go to mom. And then quite honestly, dad was in there at some point in time, but we didn't know how, or I can't remember how he got thrown in there, but
Yeah, that sounds pretty accurate. That's pretty good. So going through high school, did you know what you wanted to do, or what was your thought process looking like for the future?
going through high school, I mean, I know I wanted to be a fireman because, like I said, dad was a fireman growing up. Like I've spent many days, many parades in fire trucks. In fact, one of my favorite childhood memories is going up to the firehouse when dad was on a call or dad was doing something at the firehouse, and we're in the truck with a couple of our friends growing up. And we're sitting there acting like we're driving the truck and everything like that. So I spent a lot of time at the firehouse. So the fire service has always been in the back of my mind. But if you would have asked me this question, I hate to say this, but 10, 11 years ago, I would have told you that law enforcement was not in my path. I was going to do construction management and fire science back in my senior year. So I'm still kind of on that path, but construction management's out the window.
Yeah, I was in a very similar situation when I was in grade school and high school. I wanted to be a cop. That's all I wanted to do. I'm not sure how old you are, but when I was a kid, we still had dare officers was still a thing. And ironically, I think it was first grade. In first grade, I had this dare officer. I thought he was the coolest dude in the world. I was obsessed with Batman. Like, what kid doesn't like Batman? And this guy walks in and he's got a duty belt that looks just like Batman's. And I'm like, well, that's pretty cool. I could actually be Batman. So my entire life, I wanted to be a cop. And fast forward, I got through college, and I was actually, when I was in college, I was double majoring. I was going for, this is ironic, I was double majoring in criminal justice and broadcast journalism because I wanted to have a radio show too as something to fall back on. Because everybody had always told me the same thing, if you want to work in public safety, have a backup plan in case something falls through, in case you get hurt, get sick, whatever. You have a backup plan. So I thought, well, that's a perfect backup plan. I can go and get my own radio show and just chill and listen to music all the time. So in college, I played football. I was on an academic scholarship, and I left because I was done. I was done playing football, left and moved back home, and I needed a job. Well, I got a security gig, or I actually backwards a little bit. I found out that there was a local trauma center in Fort Wayne, Indiana, that was hiring for security officers, and started looking into it a little bit more because my mom worked for the hospital. My aunt worked for that same hospital. Found out that the head of security, the director, was my old dare officer from first grade. So I ended up reaching out to him and was like, "Hey, here I am. Like, I don't know if you remember me." And of course, he said he did, but I highly doubt he did. And ended up doing security, and then share more as we go on. But yeah, so like I said, it was the same way. Going through high school, if you would have told me I was going to be a firefighter, I would have told you were absolutely nuts because I had zero desire to do it. Thought it was stupid that people would run into burning buildings to put out a fire. Like, let it burn. That was my mindset. So you go through high school, you're wanting to do the fire side. What kind of changed your mind and got you into the kind of law enforcement side there?
I don't really remember what like striked my or like what kind of bump in the road that I was going this way and all of a sudden I stopped and then just turned. But I eventually applied at a community corrections, Jasper County Community Corrections, and started. That's where I started my official law enforcement career at there. Was working at a work release facility. Enjoyed it. Spent 3 years out there. Decided, this isn't for me anymore. Law enforcement was really starting to take a toll on me a little bit. So I ended up leaving there and going and working in agriculture for Serious Solutions, which was completely out of the norm for me. And then it was kind of funny. I got back into it because so I was always leaning towards like law enforcement was just outside of my like want to do zone kind of deal. So actually, our county sheriff in the jail, they were having such a hard time getting people to come apply there. So they actually got one of those big state highway signs and set that out front. And the funny story about it is I actually applied at the jail like 7 times, got turned down all 6 other times. And then I was talking to some friends at the Serious Solutions one day, and I said, I want to, but I don't know if I can be told no again. And one person there just flat out said, well, what's one more no? I'm like, you know what? I've been told no 6 times, so what's one more? And it was actually funny because I went through the whole process and everything like that. And I was in the middle of a cornfield driving tender truck for a series, spreading dry manure or dry fertilizer. And I got the call from the jail sergeant saying, hey, we'd like to offer you the position. And my exact words were, I'm sorry, what? So that was a whole big deal there. So it took me 7 times, but I don't regret it one bit.
Yeah, I sim kind of a similar story. I left security and I went to go work for. I wanted to my thought process, again, going back to wanting to be a cop. I thought, well, I'm going to start off at the jail, Allen County Jail in Fort Wayne. And I applied and didn't get hired. Whatever, no big deal. And I had applied for a couple different police departments, same story. And I decided that I was going to try looking into working for a prison. And I had applied for Westville Correctional Facility. and I got hired. And the only reason why I decided not to do it was one, there's nothing out there. Like it's literally like the middle of nowhere. So I didn't want to move out there and be bored off my mind. But I also didn't love the idea of only making, I want to say at that time it was only like $12 an hour. It wasn't anything crazy. In Indiana, working for Indiana DOC, it's not like Michigan or Kentucky. I don't even know if Ohio's like this or not, but I know Michigan and Kentucky, they're union. So if you work for a prison, you're part of the union. Indiana doesn't have that. So kind of hated that idea, went back and, continued to do security for a little bit. And then I get hired by Newcastle Correctional Facility. And for whatever reason, I needed a fresh start or whatever. And I took that job and actually moved down to Newcastle. I did that for, I think, a year. Absolutely hated it. It was god awful. The place is a sex offender camp. So I really didn't like that. And I don't know how many times these inmates wanted to keep coming to me and trying to tell me their life story. And I'm like, dude, don't tell me what you did because then I'm going
Yeah,
to treat you different inadvertently.
yeah,
I don't want to do that. Just leave that crap to yourself. You want to go talk to somebody about it? Talk to one of the other inmates, but don't tell me.
yeah.
And I ended up leaving and I tried to go back to Allen County Jail again. And even with a year of experience at a prison, they still wouldn't hire me. So at that point, I was like, screw it. I ended up working at 911 call center and then went into EMS and long story there. So you get in at Jasper County. What does the process look like? Like, what does day one look like for you?
So day one for me was learning the floor. This is where your pods are, and when I say pods, I mean like the population pods. Like, so we have our holding cells, and then what we call as our horseshoe is where the six pods are. So you're going through, you're learning what pods are, you're learning what your watch tours are, and for people that don't know what watch tours are, that's when the officer is actually walking the floor, checking on every inmate, checking every cell. And that has to be done every hour, irregular hour. From there, you're just learning the layout of the jail. And of course, the new guy always gets stuck with the commissary days and the trade pass and everything like that. It was a rough start at first, but stayed with it, and got some friends, lost some friends, but
How long did it take for you to gain the respect of the inmate?
I mean, I think that's really hard to tell because even right now, I don't think. I mean, right now we're sitting about 80 inmates. I would say a lot of the inmates respect me, but not all of them do. But the biggest thing I can just tell people is like, don't lie to them. They know they can read through your lies. If the answer is no, just tell them no. I mean, they're going to respect you a hell of a lot more if you just flat out say no.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably a little bit different with a jail than it is with a prison because obviously prison you've got inmates that are in there for much longer stints than they would be in a jail. But for anybody that listens that may ever want to work at a prison or a jail or has a relative, the most important thing you can do is Brandon just said is you have to be honest. If they aren't allowed to do something, there's no tiptoeing around the issue. Like if they're not allowed to do something, they're not allowed to do it. If you tell them no about something, then no means no. Like that's it. Draw the line, and don't ever cross that line. In a prison, the difference is you. I mean, you're seeing the same guys every single day, and these guys know how to play the system. Like they know how to kind of twist things around that you may say to them. They also know how to slowly gets you to the point where, now they're able to blackmail you because you may have given them a pen when they weren't allowed to have a pen, or you may have let them spend a few extra minutes out in the common area when, it's supposed to be lights out or whatever. And they pick up on that stuff real quick. And then next thing you know, you're kind of stuck in a situation where you can't really get out of it.
The thing about inmates, Tyler, to build off you there is they got nothing but time. And the thing that I've noticed a lot with prisons and jails is like for me in the jail, my inmates still have something to look forward to. They still have that next court date of maybe they get to go home, maybe they get to see their family. Even if it's just that 5 minutes of, well, they're sitting on this side of the courtroom, I still got to see them, opposed to prison to where they might be serving 20, 30 years or even a life sentence. And the only thing they got to look forward to is their next meal.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to say because I mean it's easy to get a stigma of inmates inside of prison, people that have been convicted. You know, I I think a lot of people still really trust. Okay, so there's an argument. You know, you've got one side that says yes, the judicial system is 100% perfect, and you know there's this process and it works 100% of the time. Then you got this side that's like it's broken, and very few people are in the middle. And I like to see myself as being in the middle. I think a good portion of the time, the court system gets it right, and we figure out who committed the crime, and the correct person is the one that's serving the time. But there's a lot of times where somebody gets convicted and they didn't actually do it. They just either happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, or they're just seriously unlucky. And I think it's important for people to understand that, we talk about, I mentioned earning respect of the inmates. That's obviously a two-way street, but there's a lot of people that are, believe it or not, there's a lot of people in prison that don't deserve to be in prison. But on top of that, there's a lot of people in prison and in jail that they're extremely respectful. Like they understand they know they did something wrong, and they know that, if they get in trouble, that could add more time, especially the ones that only have short sentences. And the last thing they want to do is risk getting more time added on. But they also understand that if you disrespect them, they're going to reciprocate that and they're going to turn it right back on you.
And that's a lot of that's actually what I tell my new officers coming in is, just because these people are in jail does not make them pieces of crap. I mean, they're still humans just like I am. They're just like you. I mean, there's no other way to put it. Regardless of what they did, they're still human beings.
So, how long have you been how long have you been with Jasper?
I've been here 4 years. Yeah, four
What do
years.
you think is the best part of your job? What do you like most about it?
I like to. I've had a couple inmates come up to me, like ex inmates. They'll see me, say at Walmart or something like that, and just the success. I can read their success, and that's what makes me like. This is what I'm here. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. There's one inmate who, I mean, you could ask if you were around here. You could ask multiple people. They would tell you that there was no good left in him. But I mean, we if we see each other at Walmart, we're pulling each other to the side of the aisle. We're talking for 10, 15 minutes, just catching up. I mean, he completely turned his life 360 degrees around.
That's awesome. I think that's important to mention as well is there's a lot of there's a lot of guys and gals that have spent time in jail or in prison, and they managed to turn their lives around entirely. They realized for whatever reason that they don't want to go back to prison and that what they were doing was stupid. And a lot of it is, they were young kids and they made wrong, poor decisions. And now they want to try to do better. And I think that's awesome. And I think there should be more rehab for people that are coming out of prison to kind of help get them reacclimated back. I feel like we kind of struggle with that.
I could agree.
What do you think what do you think is the most stressful about your job?
Definitely being in charge sometimes. When the corporal position became open, I was working under another corporal that her and I have actually became pretty close. She pulled me aside one day, like, "Hey, you gonna put in for this corporal position?" I'm like, "No, I don't think I'm ready yet." And she pretty much threatened me and said, "Well, either you're gonna put it in or I'm gonna put it in for you." She goes, "You're never gonna be ready for it." Quite honestly, I could tell you right now, I'm still not even ready for it. So the stress of, like I said earlier, we have 80 inmates. That's 80 inmates under my care. I gotta make sure nobody escapes or even worse. The biggest thing I tell my officers is we go home at the end of our shifts. We go, we walk out the door the same way we walked in, and that's my number one rule on my shift is, or under my command even. We are walking out the door the same way we came in, so that's a huge stressor.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I used to tell people, when I was working in the prison, people would ask, what's it like working inside there? And I said, well, when you step in through the main door, and I don't know how it is for your guys' setup, but for us, step in the main door, you go through a metal detector, and then you got to sit on this really awful, uncomfortable chair that basically shines a laser up your butt to make sure you're not keystering anything into the prison. Can't have your cell phone with you. Got to leave that in your vehicle. The only things that we carried was mace and handcuffs. That was really it. Some of us we were trained on, like I was in that short period of time, I had gotten on the cell extraction team, and some of us were trained on some of the different lethal and non-lethal weapons inside the prison. But I always told people, when you walk in that main door, it's like you're stepping through the gates of hell, because you're dealing with some horrible individual.
Yeah, I mean it. It could be completely one or two ways. When I left the jail today, yeah, there was 80 inmates. I mean, I could go into work tomorrow, and I mean, it's happened. I go into my booking area that has 8 holding cells, and there would be no people up there today. And then like this week, I'm working all weekend, so I go in tomorrow at 5 a.m. and there could be 15 people in those holding cells because one of our holding cells can house multiple inmates. So I mean, the unknowing is, I don't know. It's kind of fun, but kind of not so fun at the same exact time. You don't really know what you're walking into the next day. So I mean, with you, you're in the prison, so you know if you're leaving or if you leave with 80 inmates per se. I know you had more than that, but the chances of you getting another say 20 is pretty rare. Opposed to me in the county jail, it's pretty regular that I leave with 80 today. I'll have probably one or two tomorrow, more tomorrow.
Yeah, we had, trying to remember, I'm going back to like 2013. I want to say, so we had, everything was separated by housing units, and each house had 4 pods, 3 or 4 pods. And I want to say each pod held, I don't even remember now. I want to say I had 200 inmates in my housing unit, and it was just me and a partner. And then typically each housing unit had 2 COs in there, but we were always short staffed because the pay was awful for us and the benefits sucked, and we were always short staffed. But we had we had two. We each had a radio, and there was one landline phone for us to use at our desk. No computer, no nothing. Like, you had a monitor so you could like monitor the cameras inside the pods, but that was about it. And it was the same thing as you. Every hour on the hour, we'd have to go in and do a walk. And the first, I think it was the first half of the shift, we would have to go in and we would have to check IDs. So everybody would have to be on their bunk. They'd have to have their ID out. We'd have to verify that they were in the correct pod, because they love to play that crap too. I don't even know how they managed to make that work. But you'd have John Smith that's supposed to be in pod 1, and he's in pod 3 for whatever reason. Like, that crap happened all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But we would go and check IDs, do all that, and then later on in the night, and then we would always do a count, and we'd have to give a count at the end, or the middle. It was the middle of the night. Give a head count of how many people were there. I think we had to do that twice. But so what do you think? What's probably the number one advice you would give to somebody that, say, it's day one of them walking in to be a correctional officer? What do you think the number one advice would be?
Just like I said earlier, like these people, even though, yeah, maybe they are in there just for a public intox, or maybe they're in there just because not just because, maybe they're in there because they murdered somebody. I mean, regardless, they're still a human being. We still have to treat them properly. I mean, just because they're in jail doesn't mean we can just treat them like crap and, like people have said, throw them in the hole and throw away the key. That's not how it works.
Jasper County has a population of a little over 33,000 people. And you said you have about 80 inmates in there at the moment. I'm assuming weekends it tends to get a little bit busier due to DUIs, and they do something on a Friday and you're kind of stuck in there until Monday.
Yeah, it's definitely hit and miss with the DUIs. Jasper County has, just for easy sake, say 30 miles of interstate. So, I mean, we get a lot of the interstate arrests from traffic accidents that for some reason somebody decided to drive when they were impaired. So, we get those people. We get your normal petty stuff of you're drunk walking down the street or criminal trespass or, I mean, domestic battery or anything like that. So, I mean, it definitely could vary.
Let's jump over to your time in the fire service. So, when did you start doing something with the fire department?
I joined 2014. So, I was 18 years old.
And I'm assuming you got like your fire one and two, or what did you do there?
Yeah, I jumped into class. I got fire 1 and 2, hazmat awareness operations. Those were the required classes that we had to do. I, I don't specialize in anything like in ropes or uh, anything along that line. Swift water. I don't specialize in any of that.
What's your guys' run volume like?
We average probably about say 350 calls a year, maybe closer to 300.
Rachel? Yeah, I was telling you earlier, I did EMS, and I did EMS for the city of Fort Wayne for 5 or 6 years, something like that. But at one point, I had stepped away and I went to work for another agency that was covering, I won't name their names. I don't even think they're really around anymore, but I was covering EMS mainly in Logansport, but I also I worked a couple shifts in Rensselaer. And for people who maybe only work EMS in a city setting, you don't really realize, yeah, out in the country and out in these small towns, you get lower call volume, but the call types generally end up being some of the like worst calls. Like I remember having a bunch of calls being in, Logansport. Most of them were out in the country, and they were some of the most gruesome traffic accidents, some of the most gruesome overdoses. Like they were rough calls. Have you noticed some of that happening with you in Rensselaer?
Actually, I was just talking to our newly EMS director the other day um, about it. Is there's one or the other. We either have, like your normal sickness calls of, hey, I have this bad cough, and for some reason they decide to call an ambulance for it. But if you're sick, you're sick. You don't think you can do it. I'm all for it. We either have those or we have a minor fender bender on the interstate with unfortunately multiple fatalities. And that's honestly what I tell a lot of the younger people too. Of we can have one rear end crash, say today. I mean, hopefully not, but figure of speech, obviously. But we could have one rear end accident today and have no injuries. People are walking and sign medical refusals, and then tomorrow have the exact same crash, exact same cars, exact same location, and you have a fatality. And that's something that I've always questioned myself and like how in the world does this even work? Unfortunately, it is the case though.
How do you handle it? I mean, obviously it's helpful that you've got your mom working in mental health, but how do you personally handle stress from difficult runs like that?
Like you said, I have mom. I have the great support system that I do. One of my real close friends has been an EMT for as long as I can remember. In fact, that's how him and I met. Is on the side of 65, and we joke about it now. Of how do we fold the stair chair? Because I am sitting on the side of 65 with cars flying by me 50, 60 mile an hour. Here I am trying to fold this damn stair chair. So,
There.
um, so him and I are really close to where he's been that 2 a.m. phone call many times of I just got woken up because of this nightmare because I've seen this person or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I unfortunately I've had many calls like that, but I've also had many situations like that. We had a again going back to when I was doing rural EMS there for a little while. It seemed like we did 24-hour shifts. I don't remember the exact breakdown of it, but it seemed like every shift that I would go to work, it was almost guaranteed that I was going to have one horrific call each shift. And I remember there was like three shifts in a row where I had to call for a helicopter to come out to the scene to pick up the patient. And, coming from working in a city setting, it's pretty rare if we ever call for a helicopter. In fact, if we're calling for a helicopter, it's got to be like a mass casualty incident or something because, in Fort Wayne, where no matter where you're at, you're probably at least 10 minutes from any given hospital in the city. But, being out in Logansport or even Rensselaer, Rensselaer's got a hospital, but it's just a general hospital. It's not a trauma center. It's not a burn center. It's just not, I don't even think they're able to do strokes, are they?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
It
So you've got
if they
that
do
issue too. What's that?
if they do, it's on the very very minimum side of it. Like get them stabilized and get them the heck out of here.
Yeah. So a lot of people don't realize that, like a lot of patients don't realize that, people think, yeah, if I get into a car accident, well, there's a hospital 5 minutes down the road, so it'll be all right. Well, it doesn't really
Yeah,
work that way. Like, yeah, we may take you there first and at least get you stabilized, depending on how bad it is. But at the end of the day, we're going to be taking you to Lafayette or wherever to the closest trauma center to actually fix you. Luckily, in northeastern Indiana, we've got two trauma centers, and you can actually split the city in half. And if you're on the south side of the city, then you're going to one hospital. If you're on the north, you're going to the other. But a lot of people don't think about that kind of stuff, especially with strokes and burns. Like we used to have a burn center here in Fort Wayne. The closest one now is in Indianapolis, and I think that's the same for you guys too. Just makes things that much more difficult.
yeah. We fly a lot of our patients out to Christ Advocate in Oak Lawn, is where a lot of our patients go, just because it's like a 20-minute flight for the helicopters.
I want to back up just a little bit. I want to go back to when did your how old were you when your dad was on the fire department? Were you pretty young when he started?
He's been on the fire department as long as I can remember. I think he's 30, 35 years in.
Okay. So what was that like for you when dad's pager would go off? Maybe you guys were having dinner or, having, family time or whatever. What was kind of going through your head when his pager would go off?
Crap, dad's leaving again. Back in my younger days, it was okay, dad's leaving again. Getting a little bit older. It never really crossed my mind of is this going to be dad's last call until I was probably in my late teens, but also in my late teens it was man that's pretty cool. I'm just sitting here just like I am right now and the pager goes off and here I am running out the door.
Yeah, so I have a 6-year old. Can't believe he's 6 years old already. But I started on a volunteer fire department back in 2012, and I had been with that same department eventually. I was on the paid staff of that department, and I was there for almost 10 years. And I remember when my kid was born back in 2018, there were several times where a pager would go off and I'd go make the run because I was like the EMS captain. So I would go and make as many of these med runs. And a lot of times I was the only one that was, the only available EMT to go make these calls for the department. And I just remember thinking, man, I got to leave my kid again. and don't get me wrong, I enjoyed what I did. I loved everything about it. But, it got to the point where as my kid got a little bit older and he was starting to say words and show emotions and everything, that he was getting upset every time, even if I was just going to work, knowing that I was going to be gone all night long. And eventually, between that and post traumatic stress and all that crap, I eventually had to step away. But neither of my parents worked in public safety. Both of my parents, actually, my mom was a nurse, and my dad owned a construction company as well. And he's now a nurse, but neither one of them worked in either volunteered or anything like that. So I was always curious of what kids felt like when that pager went off.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to the younger generation as they're, maybe they are interested in going into public safety, maybe they're not sure, or maybe they are just getting ready to step into public safety? What kind of advice would you give them?
I would just say to just go in and have an open mind. Obviously, if you're going to go into the fire, police, EMS side of it, I mean, let's be honest. It's not if you're going to see something that you don't want to see. It's going to be when. Unfortunately, that's just the case. I mean, we're there for somebody's worst day. I mean, they're calling you because they need some help. I've known very many people to go get into the service, and one call has washed them out, and it's a sad thing because I've met some very good people that way. Unfortunately, they couldn't handle. It's not that they couldn't handle the stress of it, but they didn't know how to manage it, and that's the sad thing. And that's why I say have an open mind of don't be afraid to talk to people. I know if you ask the younger, or not the younger, the older generation in the first responder worlds, they'll be like, "Oh, it is what it is. It comes with the job." Unfortunately, that's not the new way now. You're you got to have a different approach.
Yeah, and I argue that it really should have never been that way to begin with. The mentality of that, we're it's not our emergency and we need to just move on and suck it up. That should have never been a thing. And that was a thing for me when I first started. It was very very common. In fact, I vaguely remember hearing somebody say that after we had a line of duty death at our department. Somebody made a comment of, after the funeral was over and everything like that, like, why is this bothering you so much? Well, because I knew the guy. Like, he was, and granted, I was brand new. This was 2012. I'd only been there for 11 months, but I knew the guy, and it still sucked. But I think you brought up a really good point. The the public safety field as a whole, fire, police, and EMS, even though EMS is still a very young profession, has really done a disservice to everyone by not providing them with the right tools in the beginning, by not teaching them and helping them prepare a little bit more ahead of time, that you're going to see some gruesome crap. You're going to see things that no other human being should ever have to see. You're going to be treated like no other human being should have to be treated. You're going to go through some rough times. These are some things that you can do to try to fix that or to try to cope with that. And we really didn't have that. Like, you got your gear, you got your duty belt, you got your squad car, whatever, and you were told, all right, you're done with the academy, you're done with your field training, you're done with whatever, your rookie year. Get out there and change the world. Well, I have no idea what I'm doing. I used to tell people all the time, you get out of the Fire 1 and 2 class. All right, you've got your certs. Forget everything you learned. We're going to teach you the right way. And it's no different in public safety. Like, unfortunately, it's always been like that, where people have had that mentality of, well, this is the way we've always done it, so this is how we're going to continue to do it. And that's why we still have people leaving fire and EMS and police in record numbers, because they don't know how to handle the stresses. Not to mention, I had this conversation with your mom one time. Not to mention, there's not enough mental health experts in the country in general at the moment, but there's certainly not enough that are experienced. Let me rephrase that. There's certainly not enough that know how to handle people in public safety. I mean, there's barely enough that know how to handle people in the military. And that's pretty much a one shot. Like it's trauma for them, like
Yeah.
gunshots, friends dying, things like that. With us, I mean, we're seeing the same thing, but it's local. It's here. No disrespect to anybody in the military. My point being is there's not enough people out there that are able to help us when we're having these horrific nightmares and we're seeing these images during the daytime. We can't get sleep, having all of these issues. There's nobody there. That's very few people that are there to help. And I think that's one of the reasons why I started this podcast, to try to show people there are different tools out there and there are different things that you can do to try to cope with some of this crap.
That was one of the questions when I got interviewed for the volunteer fire service or the fire department was what is one of the, I can't remember exactly what it was, how it was worded, but it was like one along the lines of what do you fear? Like what do you fear that is going to happen? And I just flat out said without even thinking, with me being in a small town, I'm going to respond to somebody that I know. And I'm going to be, unfortunately, maybe the last thing they look at. And I mean, to kind of go back on a little story here, when I was with my ex-wife, we got a call for a accident just south of town here. I pulled up, first truck on scene. I'm like, man, I recognize that truck. Walk around to the front of the truck, and it was actually my ex-wife's sister. And luckily, she was okay, but I couldn't tell you what I was feeling at that point in time. In fact, we laugh about it now, thankfully. But the medic that day, I went up to the door and I told him, I said, I'm going with you. And he's like, well, I don't know if you can. I said, well, that's where you're wrong. I wasn't asking you. I'm going with you. And he said, okay, well, let me stabilize her first. Absolutely. But just know I am being in the back of this ambulance as you drive away. And like I said, going back to it, like that was thankfully, and I still thank God for it every day. She walked out of there with very, very minor injuries. But I mean, going back to like I said earlier, I could have the same exact accident today and have it be a fatal accident. I don't agree with it by any means, but my grandfather said it right a couple years back, and it's always stuck with me. Of there's only one person that decides when you die, and that's the man upstairs. I think a lot of people go entirely way too soon. I mean, I mean everybody goes entirely way too soon. You never spend enough time with anybody, and that's the sad thing is in this in this field. Like I said earlier, you're gonna be there on somebody's worst day. Unfortunately, I was there one night on 65 when I had to tell a 21-year-old that her mom, who was ejected out of a vehicle, was deceased. And then I had to turn my attention because she was pregnant to her kid. And now the kid's not, what goes through my head is now the kid's going to grow up without a grandmother. The kid's not going to know who that grandmother was. I would hope with stories and everything like that, that they would have at least some type of light. But that's the bad thing is you don't know what you're gonna come into.
Yeah, this job gets very dark very quick, and I think like we mentioned before, it's important for people to understand that they're not in this alone when you go through rough calls like this. And I will say the old timers from when I first started had it right. It's not our emergency. However, it is our job to help people in those dark hours. And people used to joke around when I was younger because I saw people I saw the horrific things that people would do to other people. And I used to say, like, man, I hate people. And, we all said that. At least everybody that I worked with, we all said that. And I think what we really meant was I hate what people do to other people. Like, I don't understand how humanity can be so mean and so cruel, or they can do things in complete disregard of other people's safety. Don't get me wrong. I was a kid. I did a lot of stupid crap when I first got my driver's license. I am by no means perfect. I have made horrible mistakes, even when I was a young adult. So, with that being said, I'm not perfect, but I think if everybody just took a couple extra minutes, a couple breaths, and just thought about, yes, I'm late for work. Is it going to make any difference if I'm 5 minutes late or 10 minutes late? Probably not. So I'm just going to drive the speed limit. I'm going to drive carefully. I'm going to put my seatbelt on. I'm going to do all the things that I'm supposed to do. People take those couple extra minutes to think that, or they think, you know what, maybe I did have one too many drinks, or, I'm kind of on that borderline. Maybe I should call an Uber or call a friend or a taxi or whatever, get somebody to come pick me up so that I'm not driving. My car is safe. It's in a parking lot. There's cameras here. And if somebody really needs something out of there, then clearly they needed it more than you. But at the end of the day, I would rather my car get broken into because I chose to take a taxi or have somebody take me home because I had too many to drink than get on the road and potentially kill somebody or myself. Regardless, I think it's important that people understand there's consequences for their actions.
And that's what I tell. Thankfully, right now, my nieces and nephews are little, so I don't. They're not even driving age yet. Not even close to being driving age. You ask me that next year, I'll tell you I don't believe it. I always told them, like, you're gonna go out and be a kid. I was the same way. Granted, I was a little bit more scared to go out and go to those parties and stuff like that that you shouldn't have been to because, I mean, mom and dad knew everybody, so they would know I was in trouble before I even knew I was in trouble. So I was scared to go out and do that. And I mean, let's be real, like you said, I was a kid at one point in time too. So I did go out to those parties every once in a while. But I had a friend that's still on the fire service or fire department to this day. He always told me, he goes, go to these parties. That's perfectly fine. Be a kid, but don't drive. Call me. He goes, I will come pick you up. We don't have to talk about it. That we don't have to talk about it that night, but we're going to talk about it. He goes, I'd much rather you call me at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and say, hey, I need a ride, than instead of getting a phone call at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and saying, hey, Brandon just wrapped his truck around a tree. So, I mean, that's one thing that I've carried from him is I've told numerous friends that I'm close with. I've told their kids, like, I'd much rather you call me. Yeah, mom and dad are going to be upset with you, but you know what? I'll let me handle them. You, my job is to get you home safely, and I don't care what time of the night it is. And that goes the same way with, like you said earlier, waking up from your nightmare. I'd much rather take that 3 a.m. phone call and talking you off that ledge, or just that helping voice instead of getting the phone call 3 o'clock in the morning. Hey, so and so just committed suicide.
Well, Brandon, I think we're going to wrap things up here. Do you have any final words that you'd like to leave us with?
No, I just thank you for the time, and I appreciate you letting me do this. It was really cool. Be honest, I was kind of trying to brush it off of, oh, this ain't gonna be too bad. You know, the 10 minutes while I was waiting to for the time to get down, I was like, oh man, what's this gonna be like?
Oh
So it
yeah.
it was it was cool.
Well, I definitely appreciate you joining us. And we'll catch you next time.
Cool. Thank you.